so honored to have with me a roundtable of Michigan's congressional delegation, Republicans Dave Trott and Fred Upton, and Democrats Debbie Dingell and Brenda Lawrence. Thank you all very much for being here. It's very difficult to coordinate your schedules. I so appreciate it. Let me start with the news that broke on Thursday. Congressman Trott, in fact, I think all of you are in agreement that you're not thrilled with the president's decision, Congressman Trott, to pull out of the Paris Agreement on climate change.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake, and I think industry leaders think it's a mistake, so it's not just Republicans and Democrats. The agreement wasn't binding. 195 countries agreed to it. We're now in company with Nicaragua and Syria, so that's not the best company. And I think the bigger issue, even beyond the environment implications, is I think it just puts us in a bad position on the world stage in terms of our foreign policy.
Congressman Upton, it's interesting. I talked to the CEOs.
Call me Fred.
Fred, I'm sorry.
Call me Dave. Yeah.
on a casual Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Fred, I talked to the CEOs of both of Michigan's biggest energy companies, Consumers and DTE. Interesting to find out that they wanted to stay under this accord, but their point is it's only good business. We're already doing these things.
We have reduced emissions nationally over the last 10 years. I'm proud of that fact. And it's a good thing. We want a clean environment. And for us, again, as Dave said, this was non-binding. There were no penalties. Mm-hmm. Why not take credit for what we did and at the same time put monitors on the ground in China and India, two of the biggest emitters, who until this point had nothing to do with this at all. So why not get them under the same umbrella and introduce and trying to follow through on real reductions?
Well, then before I get to my Democrats, because I think I might know where they're headed on this, where's your level?
We had to break their arms.
Where's your level, both of you, of confidence in your Republican president at the moment?
Well, for me, and I've served under a number of different Republican presidents, I've not been afraid to oppose a Republican president when I thought they were wrong, or support a Democratic president, whether it be Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, when I thought he was right. This is the wrong move. This is the wrong move internationally. It's the wrong move as we think about the climate. I've never been a denier, and it's unfortunate to say the least.
Yeah, I have some concerns. I think he hasn't put a great team around him in the White House. I think he doesn't understand how Washington works, so he's going to have a hard time getting things through Congress. I think it's more partisan than ever because of that. And then at a general level, there's a lack of curiosity that troubles me on some of the issues. And I didn't agree a lot with what President Obama wanted to do, but I did feel like he spent time studying the issues and, again, came to different conclusions than maybe I would have. But
Congresswoman Dingell and Lawrence, let me let you both weigh in then. I know you were dismayed. I was with you when you learned that he had turned down the Paris Accord.
Yeah, I kept hoping until the last minute that he was going to be Donald Trump and change his mind, and we were going to get surprised. All the environmental issues have been spelled out very articulately by my colleagues, but what does this do to our trust in the world? Our word is not going to be any good. Our European allies don't trust us. I think that the implications of this from a diplomatic standpoint are as serious as the environmental impacts. I'm just deeply disturbed.
Congressman Lawrence, in fact, if you tie this back in, I think a lot of people were pained when Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, said we can't, I guess the lesson here is we can't rely on the United States anymore. We're going to have to go it alone.
Devin, the one thing that, after my candidate lost, the President of the United States, I wanted that person to lead. I wanted that person to be the President of the United States, which understands the global leadership responsibility, who would understand how complex diplomacy, our allies, and is when we're talking about defending our democracy. This has been the greatest failure. This first trip abroad, where instead of encouraging and pulling people in, and the lack of preparation and the knowledge of the issues is something that has become transparent to so many. I I was like Debbie. I was hoping that the last one, because Tillerson was in support of staying in, so maybe he had his ear. There is no rhyme and reason for us to do this.
But I'll throw this open to all of you then. His supporters would say he's simply keeping the promise that he made every step of the way with his promise that it was going to be America first and everything was going to be viewed through what's best for America and not necessarily what the rest of the world
we
wants.
have to move from a campaign to being the president of the United States. And campaign promises, when you are sitting in that seat and you actually get all the information and understand the complexity of your decisions, sometimes that will put you in a different place. When you're running as a campaign, you're just trying to get your base to vote for you. He is now the president of all of the United States, all of us, and his decisions matter.
Yeah, I think I agree with Brenda, and you know, he's had some other campaign positions that he's reversed course on, so he could have done it on this issue, and I think it's a mistake, and we're going to, and I think it's playing out on the world stage in a way that's really going to be a problem. I was critical of President Obama because his attitude was lead from behind on the world stage. That didn't work, but you know, insulting world leaders, or you know, when he was speaking at NATO, I thought some of the members of NATO were snickering at his comments, and I think it really puts us in a bad place.
Well, let's talk about the outlook for a number of issues. Fred Upton, you want to jump in?
I just want to say one thing. America first, not going back and being with Syria and Nicaragua. Is that America first? That's all I'll say.
Fair enough. Fred Upton, your vote was sort of symbolic to a lot of people in helping his healthcare bill push forward and get through. Your thoughts on where we're headed, since the Senate seemed to believe that it was a non-starter?
Yeah, well, the Senate's starting from scratch. We knew that they would. We're hoping, and when I think all four of us, we're hoping that they improve the bill. We do. I think we could be unanimous on that. Are we okay on that? Right? We're hoping that they improve the bill. For me, I got a couple of big concerns. I want to make sure that states like Michigan that expanded Medicaid have appropriate cushion. I think there's some additional things that can happen, and I'm encouraged that they may. Don't know what's happening as we look at it probably the next couple of weeks when the senators really sit down and try to figure this out. But I'm also, I also want to underscore my support for those with pre-existing illnesses, and there was a lot of attention.
There still seems to be an awful lot of dispute over what...
Yeah, well, we didn't have a CBO score before, now we do.
Right.
But I'm one that says, and I got an extra $8 billion added to the 130 billion, but for high-risk pools. I'm led to believe that that's enough money, and I've said from the very get-go that if it's not, I'll be the first in line, and I think I've got support of a good number of Republicans to say we got to do more. I think there are going to be more generous tax credits available as well in terms of what the Senate package does. So we're all looking with interest. We're looking over the stadium. We're all looking with interest to see what they do, and at the end of the day, I hope that we fixed many of the flaws that are there. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Your husband famously sat there as Obamacare was being signed in after he Affordable Care Act, sorry, after he had presented the idea for universal health care, I believe, every year that he was in Congress. So there's an interesting family tie here to you watching some of that being unraveled.
This is, for me, period. If you live in this country, you've got a right to affordable quality health care. And I have a great deal of respect for Fred, but he knows that I am just deeply in disagreement on him. I mean, first of all, we should never have been in a position that we were not guaranteeing every American essential benefits, so that he wouldn't have even had to have been in a position to have worried about what we're going to do about pre-existing condition if we weren't ensuring that everybody had access to maternity care. If you've got pre-existing conditions, if you've got a mental health issue, if you've got opioid addiction, that's all gone now. Now states have the right to waive those essential benefits, which was a very...
Is this really then in how you read it? Because I don't think the congressman next to you, you're both looking at the same bill and seeing different things.
Well, it allows for states to seek a waiver, and if the waivers are granted, they're able to waive those benefits. And I want to make sure that they're still covered, which is why we, Republicans, supported the idea of high-risk pools. Whether it's the right amount of money, time will tell. And we'll see what the Senate does.
And we've got studies, and I mean, this is an honest just disagreement. that if you go to a high-risk pool, their studies are saying that we need $300 billion. And the fact of the matter is that people who have to go to those high-risk pools may not be able to afford to buy that. All of us, I keep saying everybody's got access to a BMW, but not everybody can afford to buy it. Even the CBO study said many Americans aren't going to be able to afford that health care. And I just think that we need to make sure every American can get it.
Devin, this is a break in our Congress, and this is a frustration. We didn't have hearings. We didn't have the opportunity to sit down as opposing parties.
Which Republicans feel is what happened with the original iteration.
You know
of
what?
the bill.
I'm here today, and whether it was Democrats or Republicans, we are sent here to collaborate, to legislate. And why did we sit there and put a bill through, and knowing that I had some of my Republican colleagues say they'll fix it in the Senate? That's not what we're sent to Congress to do. Why didn't we work on fixing what's wrong with it? I mean, David Trott has been very clear in the failures of the Affordable Health Care Act. Why didn't we do like we do every other major legislation, civil rights, a Social Security Act? There's amendments that made because you fix it as you go along, but there was no political courage to do that.
Jump in, Congressman.
Yeah, the process was ridiculous. It was ridiculous, 10 years ago or 8 years ago when we did the Affordable Care. I wasn't there, but the Affordable Care Act passed, and this process was completely partisan as well, unfortunately. And we need to come together and figure out ways to solve these problems. The Affordable Care Act wasn't working. Premiums doubled. People couldn't afford to use their insurance card because of the deductibles. People were pulling out of the exchange. So we had to do something. In a perfect world, we would have all sat down and figured out a way collectively to fix it. And the real problem long term with that is a partisan solution coming out of the Trump administration will just be undone by the next Democratic president, which every few years people have to totally recalibrate their insurance for purposes of health care. That's not the right way to treat our citizens.
It doesn't work. We can't do that. I mean, we got to figure out a way to work together. And one of the things I think we should all agree that we got to work on is prescription drug prices and making sure people can afford their medicine.
Absolutely.
I've just got about 2 minutes left. I would like to get into where you all think we're headed on this investigation into Russia and its influence. James Comey apparently getting set to testify now.
We need
where
the
does all this
answers.
go?
You know what? We all want the answers.
Yes.
From the get-go, I said, we've got the congressional committees that are looking at it. They have subpoena power on a number of different things. And I said it from the beginning. Let's have a special counsel if we need it. If those committees can't get the answers, let's find another venue that can. So it will take a little bit longer having this independent counsel that's out there. They've got to staff up. They've got to figure out, you got a new gorilla in the room, who gets immunity, who doesn't, how does this process work? I'm not a lawyer. We'll watch it, but unfold. But you know what? We want the answers. We do. We'll get them.
We need an independent investigation that is not partisan, and we need to follow the facts.
Yep.
I feel strongly when you start talking about treason, they said there's smoke, is there fire? The American citizens, our democracy, demand that we go through a process. And I want the answers. I really want the answers. And then I want accountability.
Even though there was a time when both of you were probably really fed up with James Comey as the head of the FBI during the election.
James Comey is James Comey. He was FBI director. He has been put in a position where he now has information. He was fired. I mean, did I cry a river over it? But why was he fired? That's interesting.
It wasn't done in the right way or at the right time, and we all want the facts.
I think we were all surprised at that, right?
Yeah,
I sure was.
I think the special counsel is going to take a year to complete his work. I think he'll find the facts and what they are. I think he'll conclude that Russia was involved in interfering with our election, despite Putin's denials this week. And then we'll see. I am troubled by the number of people on the Trump team that were communicating with Russia. That seems strange to me, and so we'll get to the bottom of that as well.
That beep means I got to get to a commercial break. Thank you all very much for being here. I really appreciate the time. We'll continue with more. We'll bring in the roundtable from Mackinac Island on Flashpoint right up to